Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in, and listen well. The thread that knew your name. On purpose, and the God who wrote your days. The house remembered her before she remembered herself. It sat where the road turned to dust, and the wind bent the old willows low. Carmen had not come back for love. She had come back because she had run out of everywhere else to go. 12 years she had wandered, building lives the way restless hands build fires in wind, bright for a moment, then ash, then the smell of something that almost was. She called every new beginning a calling, because the word sounded holy, and she needed it to be holy, because holy things do not have to explain themselves, and she was so very tired of explaining. But each purpose turned to chalk in her hands. Now, 34 and lean on courage, she stood in the doorway of her grandmother Estelle's house, carrying nothing but a canvas bag and the question that would not stop following her. What am I here for? The house smelled of cedar and old wool. Estelle had been dead 3 winters, but her loom still stood against the far wall, and the air still held the shape of her hands. Carmen crossed the room and touched the wood. The frame bore grooves worn by Estelle's fingers, the way a path bears the memory of those who walked it until the ground learned their weight. An unfinished cloth hung from the warp, its threads half-woven. The pattern stopped in the middle of a word it never finished speaking. Estelle had died before completing it, or perhaps she had completed everything she was given to complete, and what remained belonged to hands not yet ready. Child, Estelle used to say, her voice low and steady as a hymn beneath the breath. You were spoken before you were born. Carmen had smiled at this, the way the young smile at the old, warmth in the mouth, disbelief in the belly. She was not smiling now. What she understood now, standing in dust that carried the scent of a woman she would never touch again, was this. She had spent 12 years trying to speak herself into existence. Every version she built turned hollow at the center, like a gourd with its seeds scraped out. There was one season she could not unknow. In the northern cities, she had taken a room above a tannery, a place where the smell of curing hides seeped through the floorboards and settled into her hair and her clothes and the pages of everything she wrote. A merchant there discovered she had a steady hand and a gift for mimicking the cadence of official correspondence. He paid well. She wrote false trade letters, forged receipts, and fabricated inventories that made his stolen goods look lawful. She told herself it was survival. She told herself many things in that room. That this was temporary. That cleverness was its own kind of virtue. That nobody was truly harmed by ink on paper. But the ledgers she kept in her mind never balanced. And one evening, alone, she caught her reflection in the darkened window as rain streaked the glass, and the woman looking back wore a face she didn't recognize, not wicked, not monstrous, just absent, like a house with every lamp blown out. That was the night the silence first spoke. It pressed on her chest like a millstone and asked, with the patience of a lie that has learned to wait, would it matter if you never woke? Your spare thread, it whispered. You belong to no pattern. She did wake. She woke because the body insists on breathing, even when the soul has forgotten why. She woke, and she packed, and she walked south without a destination, because moving felt less like dying than staying still. The road took months. The road took the last of what she had. And when every other road had spent itself, only one remained, the one that bent through dust and willows and ended where Estelle's house still stood, patient as a lantern left burning in a window. It was Estelle's neighbor, old Vincent, who found her the next morning. He came carrying dried figs and a clay pot of stew, as he had done every week since the burial, tending the house the way a man tends a promise. "So you came back," he said. "I had nowhere else," Carmen answered. "Your grandmother told me you would return." "My grandmother said many things." "She said one thing, again and again, the way a bell says one thing, and means it every time." He paused, and the pause carried decades. "That girl was written before she was born, and the road will bring her home when her own roads run out." Vincent had his own scars. Carmen knew this, the way you know a wall has been broken and mended, because the plaster is a shade lighter where the crack was filled. He had buried a son 20 years back, a boy of 14 who went swimming in the river and never surfaced. The grief had stripped Vincent to the bone, taken his appetite and his speech and his belief that the world made any kind of sense. But faith had built him up again, different, the way a limb heals stronger at the fracture, the way a field burned to black pushes back greener the following spring. He spoke now, from that mended place, not above the wound, but through it. "Do you know what your grandmother believed about that cloth?" He nodded toward the loom. "She called it a poiema, learned the word from a traveling teacher who carried the apostle's letter to the Ephesians." "A poem," Carmen murmured. "A fashioned work," Vincent said. The teacher read it this way: "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." He let the silence hold those words, the way a mother holds a child she nearly lost, tight, unwilling to let go. "Your grandmother believed every soul is a thread in a cloth God began weaving long before the world drew its first breath, not thrown in by accident, not tangled there by chance, placed, colored, named. And the good works," she said, "are not burdens, forced from without. They are the shape of your flourishing, the contour of your joy, each laid out, before you existed, to refuse them." Carmen stared at the hanging threads, each one distinct, each one holding its place as though it remembered what it was for. A swallow darted past the window, and the light in the room shifted, and the gold threads in the cloth caught the sun and released it again, as if the cloth itself were breathing. Vincent waited. He had learned from grief and from years that truth lands best when it arrives at walking pace. "The psalmist wrote it plainer," he continued. "Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them." Do you hear it, Carmen? Before you had a name, he had a purpose. Before you drew breath, he was not finished. Something cracked inside her, not the sharp crack of shattering, but the slow groan of hardened ground in spring when the soil remembers it was meant to open. "But I have wasted it," she said, and 12 years of borrowed armor fell away in the saying of it. I left. I built towers out of my own wanting. I wrote other men's lies with my own hand and called it cleverness. I spent half my given days on nothing, and the nothing is all I have to show." Vincent did not flinch. He sat with her words the way he had once sat with his own grief, steady, refusing to look away. "Yes," he said, "you wandered. You built on sand. You wrote your own story with stolen ink." The honesty burned the way iodine burns a wound, not to destroy, but to make clean. "But hear me, child. The God who prepared the works beforehand is the same God who spoke through the prophet Joel and said, 'I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten.' Do you understand what that means? It means the locusts are real. The waste is real. He does not pretend you didn't lose those years, but he is a God who makes restoration out of ruin, who takes the very field the locusts stripped and brings it back to harvest. The road was laid before your feet learned to walk. It did not crumble while you were gone. It is still there." Carmen looked at the cloth. She saw the colors Estelle had chosen: deep blue, the red of wine, threads of gold that caught the light as if the cloth remembered the sun. She saw the place where the pattern stopped, the empty warp waiting, patient as a field ploughed and ready for seed, and she understood, for the first time, that the cloth was never Estelle's alone. The pattern had always held space for the thread that would come after. She knelt, not beside the loom, but on the bare floor, her forehead against cool stone, her hands open and empty as the day she was born. "I cannot finish what I never started rightly," she whispered. "Then start rightly now," Vincent said. "The one who knit you in the womb is not surprised you are kneeling here. He wrote this day too." The confession came like brush fire, the kind that clears a field to bare soil, so new seed can take root. She named it all: the running, the self-invention, the merchant's forged letters, the ledgers that never balanced, the face in the rain-streaked window she didn't recognize. She named the silence that told her she was spare thread, and she called it what it was: a lie spoken by the enemy of the weaver, designed to make her lie down and die before her last thread was drawn. And in the naming, something ancient and fierce met her on the floor of that house, something that did not ask permission and did not knock, because it had been there before she was even born, because it had built the house and built the woman, and had never, not for one moment, left. She rose. The dust clung to her palms and knees, and she let it stay. It was the same dust from which God forms all living things. She walked to the loom. "I do not know the full pattern," she said. "You do not need to know the full pattern," Vincent answered. "You need to know the weaver. Take up the thread he placed in your hand today." Carmen reached out and took the shuttle. It fit her palm the way a name fits the one it was given to, not because she earned it, but because the namer does not make mistakes. She drew the first thread through the warp, and it held. Outside, the wind moved through the willows. Morning light fell through the window and rested on the cloth the way a hand rests on the head of a child who has finally come home. The pattern was not finished. It would not be finished today or tomorrow, or perhaps in her lifetime. But it was hers to walk in, thread by thread, day by written day, in the works prepared before she drew her first breath. By a God who does not weave, spare thread, and who had never, not for one moment, stopped weaving. Selah.